be overseeing the FBI have ignored egregious examples of corruption over many years. But they're getting very hard to ignore because they're just so obvious now. And it's not just the raid on Mar-a-Lago. Consider the Gretchen Whitmer kidnapping case. You may remember that story. It's from the fall of 2020. You may even have followed it a little bit and heard how it ended. So it seemed like a terrorism plot was in fact a setup by the government to make a group of ordinary people in Michigan look like terrifying right-wing extremists, those violent white nationalists Joe Biden is always mumbling about. Well, it turns out there aren't enough of those people in real life. They're pretty rare, actually. It's not a very racist country, despite what they tell you. So the Justice Department had to go create some, and they did. And that's not just our opinion. That was the finding of a federal jury in Michigan. So it's a shocking story, really. But the details of that story are even worse than that. They are beyond belief, and we'll tell you what they are in just a minute. But first, to set the scene, here is Gretchen Whitmer herself, governor of Michigan, announcing that she was the intended target of a terrorism plot. This is from October 8th, 2020.
Earlier today, Attorney General Dana Nessel was joined by officials from the Department of Justice and the FBI to announce state and federal charges against 13 members of 2 militia groups who are preparing to kidnap and possibly kill me. If you break the law or conspire to commit heinous acts of violence against anyone, we will find you, we will hold you accountable, and we will bring you to justice.
Oh, we'll bring you to justice. I'm so important that militia groups have organized to take me out. What a self-aggrandizing description. But the last thing she said, we'll bring you to justice. Well, they actually tried to do that. They had a trial and then a retrial. And thanks to that, we have testimony and cross-examination that reveals what actually happened, how the FBI engineered this plot. Now, most of the media were paying zero attention to this. Julie Kelly of American Greatness has actually covered it, and we're grateful to her for what she's found. So here's the outline. In early 2020, a 35-year-old Army veteran called Dan Chappell, nicknamed Big Dan, was working as a contractor for the U.S. Postal Service. He drove delivery trucks. He was scrolling Facebook one night, and Chappell says he found a pro-Second Amendment group called Wolverine Watchmen. He says he just happened upon it. So Chappell testified that he was concerned by the group's criticism of law enforcement. So he went to a police officer friend of his and asked for advice. None of the messages within the group violated any law. But somehow, within a week, Chappell wound up connected to the FBI, to several FBI agents, including a special agent called Jason Chambers. Now, we learned through testimony in the trial this week why Chambers was interested in the case. It turns out that Chambers, in violation of FBI policy, was running a side hustle. He just incorporated a security firm called EXE Intel, and he saw his work on the Whitmer case as a way to promote his own business. We know that because throughout 2020, someone affiliated with his business, their Twitter account, repeatedly tweeted non-public information about the kidnapping case that Dan Chappell was building for the FBI. So it's not surprising, given the built-in incentives here, which were against policy once again, that Chambers appeared to do everything he could to make sure the investigation went according to plan. Now, no investigation can go according to plan because there shouldn't be a plan. An investigation is the process of finding out what happened. An investigation is not the process of orchestrating things to happen. But that's exactly what this became. In all, the FBI, with Chambers as the handler, paid Chappell, Big Dan, more than $60,000 in the course of just a few months. Today, Chappell testified that he made more money working for the FBI in 7 months than he did working for the United States Postal Service over the course of an entire year. So there's a lot of money moving from the FBI, the federal treasury, to this informant. So the FBI told Chappell that in exchange for all of that money, he needed to start assembling a group of right-wing extremists for the FBI to prosecute. They made the whole thing up. And he did that with the FBI's help. Within a few weeks, the FBI created a new Facebook group called Patriot 3%ers. This is why you should be careful of Facebook, by the way. Oh, it's just this group. It looks interesting. Yeah, okay. So Chappell and several members of that group then attended a protest at the Michigan State Capitol. Look at you bringing people together, the FBI handler texted Chappell. Now, throughout that protest, which didn't look a whole lot different from the January 6th protest, Chappell kept in close touch with federal agents. He informed the feds that a 37-year-old man called Adam Fox was at the state capitol during the protest. Now, Adam Fox was got to be one of the least powerful people in our society. He lived alone with his 2 dogs in the basement of a vacuum repair shop. Why? Because he had no money whatsoever. In fact, he had so little money that in order to get running water to brush his teeth or use the bathroom, he had to go to a nearby Mexican restaurant and use their men's room. So Chappell began texting this diabolical mastermind, Fox, hundreds of times. But Fox seemed inherently moderate, actually. He wrote things like this, quote, "Our goal is to restore the constitutional republic." Fox also said, quote, "In our hearts and minds, we are not domestic terrorists." Oh, sounds very dangerous. So based on those text messages, the FBI gave Chappell more instructions. They provided Chappell with several $5,000 limit credit cards, and they told him to give those credit cards to Fox and tell him to spend it on guns and ammunition. So Fox, despite the fact he had no money at all, he had to use the men's room in a Mexican restaurant to brush his teeth, refused. On 5 separate occasions, he refused to take the credit cards to buy guns and ammunition. Then, what a terrorist. Then in July of 2020, Chappell suggested that Fox and others fire rounds into the governor's mansion as well as at her cottage. But the alleged plotters, including Adam Fox, again refused. They didn't want to hurt the governor. Ultimately, in August of 2020, the group started to splinter. Chappell and other informants were instructed to keep the group together. No! Keep it together! Keep the threat real! So they introduced another undercover agent who pretended to be an explosives expert. He showed the group a video of a bomb that blew up a vehicle to prove he knew what he was doing. Where'd that video come from? Well, it was made by the FBI. Is this shaking your confidence a little bit? These details are real, by the way. They came out at trial. Then the Bureau recruited a convicted felon and a longtime FBI informant called Stephen Robson to introduce a new idea to Fox as well as to Barry Croft. This time, the idea was to kidnap Gretchen Whitmer. Robson, with the FBI's money, organized several events, including a national militia conference in Ohio, training in Wisconsin, and a meeting in Delaware. FBI orchestrating all of this. On July 18th, 2020, at one such militia meeting, again, organized by the FBI, when they tell you, oh, right-wing extremists. In this case, they created them. So at this militia meeting, an alleged plotter called Ty Garbin rejected out of hand the idea of kidnapping Gretchen Whitmer. Didn't want to do it. No, I don't think so. Kidnap the governor? No, we're not crazy. We just want a constitutional republic. Okay. Then the topic came up again in August. And then another defendant called Daniel Harris was equally adamant. No snatch and grab, he said. I swear to effing God. So clearly, they said it emphatically, out loud, explicitly, these are people who are not interested in kidnapping Gretchen Whitmer, the governor of Michigan. But the FBI kept pushing. The FBI informants drove the defendants to Gretchen Whitmer's home. Then they suggested killing the governor of Virginia, also a Democrat. On September 5th, 2020, FBI Special Agent Jason Chambers texted Chappell, quote, "Mission is to kill the governor specifically." What country is this? To pressure one of the defendants, a man called Barry Croft, into doing that, one FBI agent admitted this week that a female informant slept in the same hotel room as Croft. It was a honey trap. FBI agents also testified this week that they regularly got high with Adam Fox. They smoked weed with Adam Fox. They said he was so high, in fact, he was high in all of his meetings with them. Again, that's against FBI policy. You can't just give drugs to people and hope they do something bad. Well, after all of this failed to produce a kidnapping plot, it fell on yet another FBI agent called Richard Trask to build the criminal case against the defendants. Now, that same year, Trask, who has now been convicted of beating his wife, called Donald Trump a piece of excrement on social media. Really? Yeah. Just nonpartisan federal bureaucrats, public servants doing their job.
This is Pastor Robert L. Carver II, and I'm so glad that you joined me here. I have something I want to let you know. You see how high gas is? You see we have a baby formula shortage. We also have food that's high. Inflation is high. What is going on? Well, things may get worse before they get better, and you need to be prepared. Go to preparewithrobert.com. Go to preparewithrobert.com. Brought to you by My Patriot Supply. Get emergency food kits right there for 2,000 plus calories a day. You're going to need that. Brought to you by My Patriot Supply. Go to preparewithrobert.com. Don't be left behind. Be ready now. Let's go.